Hi everyone, my name is James Dahlvang. Let us pray. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God. Amen. What is the greatest commandment of all today, and where does it come from? As I said, my name is James Dahlvang, and I'm a junior studying cell biology at the University of Minnesota. In the midst of the chaos and tragedy of the coronavirus, I'm glad to be with you all, virtually. Like the rest of you, I have lots of questions. Questions about career opportunities, classes, and about people I know and love who are at risk. While all of these remain unanswered, I'm hopeful and trust that God is working in our world and in each of us. So, peace be with you, and thanks for welcoming me into your homes today. As a student at Lutheran Campus Ministry, I'd be remiss not to start my sermon with questions. Every time our pastor finishes the gospel, she first asks us, what was challenging about the text? What was hopeful? What questions do you have after reading it? Because our community is a vibrant mixture of engineers and English majors, questioners of God, and those certain in their faith, we usually don't agree on everything. But I think that because we ask questions, and because we all come from different places, we always gain a deeper understanding of the text. Now, don't worry. In addition to it being impossible now, I wasn't planning on having you all do that today. But our reading does start with a question. A scribe asking Jesus which commandment is first of all. Jesus responds by initially quoting a speech of Moses's, in which he commands the Israelites to love God above all else. He continues by listing a second commandment, this time from Leviticus: love your neighbor too. If you're like me and grew up in the church, or if you've been in the church for a long time, this may seem predictable. Of course, love is always the answer. But how? Jesus tells us to love the Lord with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, with all the kindness, faithfulness, wisdom, and power that we can muster. So how does that translate to our lives today? Jesus doesn't give explicit instructions in the text. However, he does give some insight into what loving God does not look like. In verse 38, Jesus seems to do a 180, denouncing the scribes. He claims they devour widows' houses and say long prayers, not out of faithfulness, but out of false piety. After preaching, he watches a widow put her last 2 coins into the temple treasury. Jesus reacts by calling the disciples in, stating that the widow has contributed more than all those who are contributing to the treasury. For she did not give out of abundance, but out of poverty. She put in all she had. A year ago, I took a Shakespeare course. I found that the most challenging aspect of the plays was figuring out the tone of the speaker. I'd read the play, come to class with my interpretation of the meaning behind each monologue, only to find out it was probably wrong, all because I had misread the tone. To fully understand our gospel verse today, I think we have to ask ourselves, what is Jesus' tone when speaking to his disciples about the widow? The widow is undoubtedly faithful, and my goal is not to undercut her sacrifice. But I don't think Jesus is speaking to the disciples with admiration. I think he's speaking with a deep sense of despair and sadness for the woman. Jesus is sad. This was her idea of love. Theologian Chad Myers gives us insight into why Jesus may be dejected about this widow. When Jesus mentions that scribes devour widows' houses, he may be referring to the process of scribal trusteeship, in which scribes would allocate the assets of a widow's late husband, because women were not allowed to manage their husbands' estates. Not all scribes were bad people, but just as Christian communities can be wrought with scandal today, some scribes did take advantage of their legal power, embezzling funds during scribal trusteeship. This means it's entirely possible this widow was so poor because of the scribes, the very same people who were looked upon as religious leaders and entrusted with monetary gifts. Yet despite this, she still gives faithfully, expecting that her offerings will make a difference. What does it mean to love the Lord your God and your neighbor as yourself? To this woman, it meant giving all she had, down to the last penny. But did she have to? I don't think she did. I'm not saying that we shouldn't give to the church. When I was a junior in high school, I was able to travel to Tanzania because of a financial gift, and that trip has driven my life and career path ever since. At LCM, we need money to go on service projects, travel to places like the US-Mexico border, and run our day-to-day operations. Here at Shepherd of the Hills, I know your offering goes towards good causes, too. So when I say the widow didn't have to give, it's not because giving isn't necessary, for giving is always a noble deed. It's because the widow had so much more to give than her last 2 coins, yet still thought she needed to give them to be faithful. When Jesus commands us to love the Lord and to love our neighbors, he's not asking each and every one of us to give all our money. To some of us, that is how we show Christ's love. But some of us are called to contribute to service projects, be devoted parents, or use our professions for good. The face of God, the face of love, is not one-sided. Going back to the first scribe Jesus encounters, both Jesus and the scribe tweak the Deuteronomy verse. Regarding the first commandment of all, Moses said, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might." Did you catch that? With all your might. Both Jesus and the scribe rephrase this. Jesus adds in, "with all your mind," and the scribe reiterates, "with all your understanding." These aren't part of the original text. But Jesus emphasizes that the scribe, as a person with legal and religious authority, can do much more with his mind than with his might. By tweaking the verse, Jesus commands the scribe to show his devotion to God and his people in a different way than originally commanded. When the scribe restates this, Jesus praises him. An extraordinary event, considering that Jesus denounces the scribes only 4 verses later. But in that moment, both Jesus and the scribe were on the same page. The scribe knew his calling to love God was to use his mind and understanding, to think about his authority and use it for good. Our world today is hurting. It was hurting before the coronavirus hit the United States. But now we share in the suffering with our neighbors across the globe. My heart aches for the elderly, for those who have worked years and years to get to retirement only for the market to crash, and for those who work on the front lines of healthcare. Rachel Patzer, an epidemiologist from Emory University in Atlanta, recently tweeted about the sacrifices her and her husband have made. Her husband is an emergency room doctor, and because he's treating coronavirus patients, he and his wife decided that he should isolate himself. This left her alone to homeschool their 2 young children and take care of their third, a 4-week-old newborn. A new dad, pulled away from his children for who knows how long. A new mother, without the support she expected. This is just one example of the countless stories of love shown as a result of this virus. Physicians in Iran are working without personal protective equipment as a result of shortages, putting themselves at great risk. Scientists across the world are working around the clock, trying to unlock this virus's secrets. Grocery store clerks worked overtime last weekend, ensuring everyone had enough food to stay inside and keep themselves safe. And my generation of medical leaders is watching, training for our chance to prevent this from happening again. The face of love looks different for each person and in different situations. Yet nothing can remove me and you from the fact that we are God's, and God has given us a place in this world to love our God, our neighbor, and ourselves. I trust that at Shepherd of the Hills, you're all taking care of each other. Even though we're in isolation, away from our communities, our loved ones, and what may seem like our God, you have a place here. What does it mean to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself? It means to love your place in the world and use it well, because you are God's no matter what else is going on around you, and your life has meaning. You are God's. So go now and love the way you best know how. Amen.